Hey everyone, today we're joined by Tony Tiyou. He is the founder and CEO of Renewables in Africa, which is a media brand and also a consultancy focused on accelerating clean energy in Africa. Hope that's a good description, Tony. Yeah, over to you to give a little bit of an introduction about yourself and your background. And then hopefully we can do a deep dive into the African renewable market and specifically the REC and IREC market in Africa as well.
Well, the first thing I would say that maybe I want to hire you because you get the introduction right. No, that's absolutely perfect. So yes, I'm Tony Tiyou, so founder and CEO of a company called Renewables in Africa. And like Oliver rightly said, so we are a virtual media platform. We're raising awareness about renewables energy in continent of Africa, but also beyond, and also involving to sustainability, where we very much present in carbon markets, supporting clients to tap into this market, and then helping them to issue and trade both the IREX, the carbon credits, but also supporting company to decarbonize. So, and it's a pleasure for me to be talking to you guys today.
So yeah, I guess my first question to you is, what is the current status of the African rec market and ecosystem in general? How do you see it and how has it evolved over time?
I think that's an excellent question, and that's probably one of the reasons why 2 3 years ago we decided that we wanted to step into this market, because we could see that it's a growing market with everything's happening around the world, including the current climate, where I know there's some certain uncertainties coming from our North American colleagues. The market is still growing, but we could see that the continent wasn't really tapping too much into that, right? So that's what we made, because as a company looking to do awareness for renewable energy, sustainability, we wanted to raise awareness to that as well, because we see that as an excellent opportunity for developers to tap into additional revenue stream and some sort of financing as well. And it's a relatively new market. Why? Because typically the clean energy market in Africa, in terms of volume liquidity, it's a lot smaller compared to other regions. But it's also a lot smaller because not a lot of people know about the opportunity, right? Because if you're talking about specifically the IREX, so I think I can really trace exchanges, from about 5 years ago, 2020. I'm sure there was some before, but from 2020 up until now, definitely there has been some progress. And more specifically, over the last 2 to 3 years, so what I have seen is actually the volume is doubling in year on year. So definitely see that there is a great interest there from people. And people could see that because they could see that, hey, listen, so not only I have built these assets that's generating renewable power, but I don't even need to do anything else, to be able to tap into the reg, just by virtue of having these power generation. So you can tap into the market, providing you can register your device. And if you can work with some people, okay, like myself as a consultant, that can make it happen, that could help.
How much is the volumes already, like year on year? Though I think those are like really interesting numbers.
Very, because I think compared to maybe Europe, it could be still very, very small. But in 2024, for example, more or less, I think we can talk about between 3.5 million IREX that have been actually sold across the continent. And the year before, it was half of that. And the year before was half of that. So that's why I say that approximately, right? So that's what I say. So over the last 3 years, so we've gone through something like about 800K in terms of volume, to 3.5. That's IREX, right? So I'm not talking about the actual trend. I'm talking about the number of IREX that have been sold.
So that's 800 gigawatt hours?
Yes. Yeah, 800 gigawatt hours. You're correct, yeah. 800 gigawatt hours. Yes, exactly.
And we've gone now to then, well, if it's doubled 2 years in a row, then roughly like 2 terawatt hours?
Yeah, 3,000
That's amazing.
gigawatt hours in a terawatt. If not terawatt hours. Yeah, that's what we've seen. And this is because like more people getting aware of this market, more people participating. So, and it's growing, but there's still a lot of room for progress, definitely.
Do you know like what's the total like renewable production capacity as well? How much of that renewable production is residual? How much is tracked with IREX, basically?
Okay, so I've not looked at that more specifically, but what I can tell you, for example, in terms of solar markets in Africa, we've done about, in general, right? So there has been, I think, 4 gigawatts of solar that has been produced across the continent. That's only for solar. And for wind, you can easily add another 1 or 2 gigawatt that were there. Now, obviously, you can look at the corresponding energy produced in gigawatt hours that would be, and then you compare that as well with what is on IREC. So, but because what you also need to know, it's for IREC in the continent, there's only 17 countries which signed up for IREC scheme. As you know, it depends on the country who signed up, right? So not all the continent is represented. That's why I'm saying there's clearly scope, and every year there are new countries that are joining the scheme. So that's why you can also see a natural progression and natural expansion of the and the continent of Africa, we're talking about 54 countries. So if you take into account some region that are still disputed between countries, so 17 out of 54, as you could see, there's definitely a lot of scope there. So that's why I'm confident that it's a market that will be growing.
Absolutely. It seems to be doing great. Do you have like any indication on because I was actually looking around. We in Soldera, you purchase proprietary price information and volume information, to kind of get the idea how these markets and everything looks like. And I was very surprised. I didn't see like any of the African continent prices at all.
To be honest, pricing is very difficult. In fact, to get any information for African IREX is very difficult, to be honest. You pretty much need to approach various companies or desk participants who are in the market and have a one-on-one conversation with them to sort of pull things together to get a little bit of a flavor how the market is looking like. So you won't see a lot of that. In terms of the pricing, same thing. But what I can tell you, roughly speaking, like I said, don't quote me for that, but that's just average that I've seen. So pricing, they will vary between $1 and $5, correct. And also it would depend on the region, the country. And also,
that's high. I think India currently, for example, has 0.5 roughly. So that's double of India right now, basically.
Because as also those rec, as you know, so it's year on year, right? So depending on the vintage. So if you're not using it, you're kind of losing it. So, and it's a typical commodity market, If there's a lot of supply, not a lot of demand, so obviously pricing is dropping. And I know, particularly in India, you have places like India, Turkey, Brazil, because they have a lot of supply. Sometimes they struggle a little bit with the price, so it's got to be a little bit adjusted. In the continent, we don't have that just yet. So we still have an issue with supply because I regularly get people reaching out to me and say, hey, do you have this quantity for me, this X amount of gigawatt hours that you can sell to us? So because we see other issue in terms of supply.
I'm interested, are national reg schemes also present? Because sometimes in Europe they'll have like a local REC system that's separate from the sort of European system. I imagine in Africa you might have something similar where you have an internal REC system within a nation and also IREC as well. Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about that?
You'd be surprised. As I'll say, so the whole IREC system, carbon credit, is still relatively new. So for most of the people in countries of Africa. So you don't have many national REC scheme recs. You do have it, some for sure, but not many. I know places like South Africa, yes, they have it because obviously it's the most industrialized country in the continent. They have something national. And Egypt as well, which is the other buoyant market in the continent, they have a lot more established markets, right? However, I would say compared to those international schemes like IREX, so the national scheme here sometimes lack some level of standardization and also international recognition. And that can sometimes limit the attractiveness. So that's why you would see in those countries, so producer would prefer IREX for the broader market access and standardized verification processes.
You mentioned a very interesting term. You said IREC carbon credit. I noticed that this was referred like that by an Indian colleague as well that I discussed with. In my head, they're like completely separate things, right? One you need to basically do with the IREC registry. What is it, ICX, I guess, in India, and I don't know if in Africa it's the similar organization. And then carbon credits are, done by Verra, for example, or some other NGO. Now there's new ones popping up. So do you guys sort of bundle them together or handle them separately, or are carbon credits even relevant? That, let's be honest, they're kind of getting destroyed out there. So
no, they do also for a very practical reason in the fact that, unless I'm wrong, but carbon credit is still global as opposed to localized like Rex Ruby. And remember, I mentioned only 17 countries tap into IREX at the moment. So that means in many countries where you have great projects, but unfortunately they can't do that, which for me is a shame. The other option then for them is to tap into carbon credit. And also the other challenge there, it's which is not a challenge, it's, let's say, the way they're structured, as you know. So carbon credit, because you have a lot more criteria that come into play, so you can sometimes achieve better pricing compared to IREX, even if obviously the process to acquire carbon credit is slightly a lot more longer than that. So that to say that as for us, we definitely will treat them separately. And we make those developers or asset owner know that you have to choose which one you want to go for each of the assets. Yeah, obviously you can mix and match. Say that, okay, part of my portfolio, I want to open that to IREX. The other one, I'm going to open that to carbon credit. You're free to decide, but obviously you got to choose, as you know. So it's all about avoiding double accounting for the CO2. So you got to choose. So which one you want to go for. We educate them on that, but also advise them on how they could choose it, and then they make their own decisions.
I was talking with one producer in Global South, and he's told me that for the future, he registered direct, and for the past 5 years, he registered carbon credits. But then I asked him, all right, have you been able to sell those carbon credits? And he was like, it's tough.
Yeah.
But IREX are seem to be a lot more in demand and a lot more trusted basically out there for good reason. It's a very simple instrument.
Yeah, it's a very simple instrument. It's fast, puts money in the pockets. Obviously, providing you have a buyer and a seller very relatively quickly. But you mentioned something that I want to sort of jump on, and you're absolutely right. The challenge for many of those guys as well, it's not just to have the because the title, the instrument, the title is a financial title, but it's worth nothing if you can't sell it or if you can't. So having access to buyers is critical. So that's why obviously I commend people like yourself, the platform that you build. I mean, for us as well, we've created a platform called AfroCab Lite, where we purely and simply trading as well those assets. So we actually launching that as well. So clearly there's a potential for scope there if you guys are willing to explore that. But it's something that we recognize. So you need to have access to international buyers, and most of the time those guys, because people that own those assets, they're sometimes small producer or small asset owner. They don't have access to the huge market, right? So that's why helping them get it done, that's fine, because it costs money to get carbon credit, and it costs some money to have the IREX, obviously. So if you're not able to trade and recoup that, you may lose serious amount of money there. So yeah, so that's why it's important to take that into consideration.
I agree.
I'm interested in the different issuers in the different countries, because you rightly pointed out that not every country in Africa has an issuer for IREX. It seems to me like it's kind of dominated between two, being the IREX central issuer, which is the GCC, but also I keep seeing energy peace partners popping up. I don't know if you've encountered them, and I think that kind of speaks a little bit to the angle of IREX being a tool for community development as well. And I wondered if that had an impact on pricing, especially when international buyers might be looking to kind of do more good with their purchases as opposed to simply just offsetting their carbon.
Yeah, I think there's two pieces in your question, but let me handle it properly. So you're right. The issuers, they're not many. Yeah, the two that you mentioned, GCC, everybody knows GCC for sure. And in fact, GCC will stand for the issuer in many countries, because what happens sometimes is they have designated an organization to be able to issue that. I give an example. For example, in Kenya, it's called EPRA, right? But EPRA is not yet ready, although they have accepted, but they're not ready yet to be able to issue that. So GCC still handle it. So, and you will see many kind of situation like that in Africa. So the couple of, like I say, for places like Egypt, South Africa, okay, you find some other people, or maybe those guys that you mentioned, you can find them, but they're not many. They're actually limited. So does it have an impact on pricing the limited amount of issuer? To be honest, I've not done specific studies on that, so I'll be a little bit presumptuous from my side to say yes or no. I would like to think that there could be some correlation. But one thing that definitely will have some impact on the pricing is what you say, it's impact that could have embedded. Because obviously, if you're doing a project that is impact a whole community, so that may be a lot more valuable than something that is just powering one business, even if that's already good on its own. But yeah, those are what you call additionalities, right? But it has even more impact in the GRX. I'm sure you heard about GRX, right? We say distributed renewable energy, yeah, which is where they're taking that a little bit more into consideration. And this for me, and that scheme for me is particularly interesting. So, because in Africa, compared to the rest of the world, there are not that many huge projects, huge power plant. Yeah, I give you an example. You're just going to find a handful of projects that are 100 megawatts across Africa. Yeah, what we call big projects, it's anything between 10 megawatt to 50. Those are big projects. Whereas in Europe, in America, those are very small. Yeah. But what you have a lot of small projects sometimes distributed, right? So, and that's why these guys were frustrated as well because they couldn't tap too much into IREG. Not that IREG will prevent them from signing up, but it's because you know that if they don't generate enough volume, buyers won't be interested. So that's why guys like Jerry, for example, finding a way to bundle them, bring them together, and create maybe a new category is helping them to tap into the market. And that's for me, clearly as well, as especially for the continent of Africa, that's a way as well for me to dynamize the market and maybe open up to some new players, find a way to aggregate those small players so that they can also take part of it. But there's some initiative in that sense.
I mean, this is exactly what happened with us as well in Europe, right? We basically got into this market because we noticed that in Europe, 30% of the producers were residual, which means they were not selling. It's simply money they leave on the floor, right? They're not picking it up. Like there's literally, they every day it's kind of like they walk on the street and every day there's $100 euro there and they're not like bending down to pick it up. Then we were like thinking, okay, but what if somebody else will pick it up for them and give it to them? That's what we're doing, right? So we basically use the technology to handle all the paperwork and compliance. Then we aggregate them all together, then we sell, then we handle all the invoicing, the payments, everything is done for them. They don't need to do absolutely anything themselves. It's 99% automated. Well, after you've done the sign up, it's 100%.
Yeah.
And that's it, right? Suddenly all these people have market access that previously just couldn't be bothered to do it. Yeah, I'm very interested in looking into can we repeat the same thing in Africa as well?
Excellent. I think you're definitely going to find up in here with me. I think from what I've seen, what you guys doing looks quite interesting.
So you mentioned that there's only a few projects in Africa. I think you said that there were a handful that have over 100 megawatts. Does that reflect a broader problem in the lack of international ambition when it comes to funding big projects in Africa?
In a sense, if I have to rephrase it, why are there only few projects 100 megawatt? Yeah, that's why you want to. Okay, yeah, very simple answer. So it's that you also need to know that the grid in Africa, it's a lot smaller. Obviously, you heard about the fact that there's still a lot of countries that don't have full electrification. In fact, only few countries have full electrification, we could say. So the majority of countries, so that's not the case. So the grid is a lot smaller. So when I'm talking about that, what does that mean? It means that when you bring a 100 megawatt project, you still have to connect that to the grid. And that's the problem. If you go, for example, to a country that, I don't know, Chad, Central Africa, where you have the whole grid, which is something like not even 1 gigawatt or so like 800 megawatts. So when you come and plug in 100 megawatts, you can imagine already in terms of the integration, all the challenges that you're gonna see. So that's why you will see sometimes project that could be 100 megawatt, 200 megawatt that they want to develop, but they do that in phases because they can't they can't integrate. I give you also another example. You have which is the biggest wind project in Africa, which is Lake Turkana, that's in Kenya. That's 210 megawatts. It took them about 3 years to connect that to the grid because it's quite significant, right? So yeah. So that's the technical challenge.
Seems to be a common challenge everywhere right now, like in renewables. The grid is just not there.
Yeah, you gotta upgrade the grid for sure to absorb it, and and obviously I must admit grid in many of our countries they're not that effective, so they're losing a lot of there's a lot of losses there that happening, all kind of issue that you can think about. Financing as well, you mentioned, absolutely it's a problem to make sure that because as you know, so renewable is great, but it's also fair to recognize that it's capital intensive, at least initially, and you need to find that money. And in the continent of Africa, we don't have a lot of capital markets, right? So South Africa has it, Egypt, Morocco has it, but most of the time those money come from DFI, which is European Finance Institutions, right? So whereas in Europe, in America, that's private market. You don't need to go and bother the state, the government to come and they can do that. This guy can handle it without any problem. For us, we don't have enough big guys that can do that. Most of the money come from abroad, and a big part of it is come from GFI. And why do big private guys don't come to Africa? Because a lot of them still see that as a very risky place, for the wrong reason. Because if they look at that properly, they will see that is actually amount of default that you see in Africa. You'll be surprised to know that is as small as the US, but people just don't know that. But the perception will actually twist picture. So basically, that's this technical aspect, financial aspect, and also regulatory, because to get as well a large project like that, you need to have as well the government that sort of create the regulatory framework for you. And a lot of the government were reluctant until very recently. Why were they reluctant? Because obviously they gracing themselves with oil and gas project, isn't it, right? So you don't want to change it. So all that politics that get into place, and and that comes into the mix. And the last part is just capacity building. So you also needed to have a local labor force that's able to do it. Again, like I say, not many countries can do that. South Africa can do it. Egypt can do it. Kenya could do it. Yeah, but if you go, for example, in a project, I don't know, Burkina Faso, I promise you most of the guys that you have to bring there come from abroad, because you don't have a local supply chain who can actually handle it. So there's different kind of challenge like that.
You mentioned that the default rate is lower than the US. That's crazy. Can you expand on that one? Never heard about that.
Definitely. So those are data that you can go and check, even from the World Bank. You will see. Okay, when you look at that, it can be surprising, but if you look closely, not that much, because for a project to actually get to financial close in Africa, it takes such a long time. You have so many people looking at that from every angle, and those are actually people that come from the international markets. So they apply a certain, so this level of standard is pretty high. That's what I'm saying. So that means for that project, 100 megawatt, that's $100 million, right? So I just make it simple, right? So I know it's cheaper these days, but let's say call it $100 million. So for $100 million to happen, you want to make people, you can be sure that whoever has signed up that check has gone through all the checks possible to make sure that, and also put in place all the type of guarantees, because we know already the off-takers in Africa. So a lot of them, like I say, struggle financially. So you need a certain number of guarantees for the deal to go through. So that's what I'm saying. That is actually very solid. That's why I say when I'm talking about the GFI, I'm talking about guys like in France, Propaco or KFW, this kind of guys. BII, this in the UK here. I know they changed the name there. I forgot the old name they had. But I'm just going to say these are guys, IFC. Those are very solid guys. That's what I'm saying. For a project to cross financial close and to move into construction, you can be sure that.
Yeah.
And usually even the EPC, those are international standard. The top guys that will go and build those things. So you could be sure that people handling that. So there's a lot of guarantees at every place. That's why I say most of the big infrastructure project is very low, the default rate.
What I hear is also that Africa probably hasn't reached the point where solar is cannibalizing itself, right? So in Europe, like a lot of investments have been pulled back from renewables because the marginal benefit starts getting so small, it's just not worth it anymore. But in Africa, is that the case, or it's like completely the opposite, and you can make a lot of money there?
No, I think definitely you can make a lot. You can make a lot of money, because just for you to have, let's say, getting rid of the currency fluctuation, so the volatility of pricing due to oil and gas. That is, and also availability, because a lot of the local economies in Africa are actually hurt by the fact that they don't have access to power. If you imagine, for example, you're running your factory, yeah, and maybe 10 and 20% of the time you're having downtime, not because your equipment not working, just because you don't have power. So that means you have an order, you can't actually deliver that order, not because there isn't any, you don't have the labor for, no, just like we didn't have power, or maybe because.
So the demand is bigger than the supply even right now.
Absolutely. And also, every serious business company in Africa needs to have always a lot of genset, diesel generator running with them, so that because they can't afford, obviously, to go there all the time. But look at the amount of money that they have. So if they find now a way to replace that by solar over time, that's actually not only obviously they're getting stable power. Most of the time now it's cheaper price, or at least on par most of the time, and they can boost their productivity. No, definitely solar in Africa, it definitely works. That's not a problem, Charlotte. It definitely works.
This reminds me the Pakistani revolution, right? Where without any government subsidies, Pakistani now has solar as the biggest energy mix because it's the cheapest form of power. There's a lot of sun, and like you can actually with very small amount of money start investing in solar panels already. And people have built them all over the Pakistan to their roofs, and it's grown to be extremely popular and a massive success story, actually. Like it's brought power to most of the country thanks to the solar revolution there. And key point is like zero government subsidies. It's all naturally just pure free market moves. It's a beautiful story.
If really government around the world really let solar run its course, I'm confident that the market would grow. Otherwise, if it wasn't the case, Trump would have killed the solar industry in the US the first time. Obviously, he slowed that down, but he didn't kill it because the business case is there. I know it's going to slow that down again this time around, but he can't kill it because, like I said, the business case is there. People will see the results is there. You're absorbing that. The costs are way low now, so it's a no-brainer. Like I said, the environmental benefits, while very important, it's not even the primary decision factor, and it's economic. The decision factor for most of the people.
Just bringing it back to Africa, we put out a post earlier this year essentially praising the growth of solar in Nigeria after fuel subsidies were removed. I think we were a little bit kind of deaf to the social impacts of what happened when the fuel subsidy was removed. So is there a delicate balance to be struck between meeting the needs of a population and just, going all in on solar and removing subsidies for fuel?
Yes, I think this, I believe, always has to be a gradual process, right? Because if you remove all of a sudden all subsidies, and you also killing a certain part of the industry that relies on that, and that can have very, very, very serious impact. Remember, Africa is still a very young continent. I'm talking about the age. So the median age is about 19, 20. So that means actually, so all those business, so people working there, you can obviously have about 4 to 5 children per family. You can imagine the number of people that are impacted by this kind of decision, because it has an impact on the various families. So it has to be a gradual process. But ultimately, that's also the way to go if you don't want to skew the market, isn't it, right? First of all, I believe there should be a level of subsidy for everybody. I know people complaining about the fact that renewable solar getting subsidy, but they forget to say that is actually the same, for oil and gas. It has been the same for the last half century or whatever. It's trillions that is going there. So I believe that things should be balanced. So ultimately, obviously, you want to make sure that it's properly balanced and create level playing field. And when we have that, I know solar going to definitely progressively make sense. And in the continent, like I say, yes, I think I believe that solar really create a new kind of industry, giving a lot of opportunities to people on the ground. And you were talking about Nigeria. Nigeria is picking up big time. I can tell you that I don't have the exact figure, But I believe, from what I've heard from very good sources, one of them, it's I can't mention them, but it's one of our clients. I can't mention them. It's one of the top solar manufacturer, and they told me behind closed door that Nigeria has achieved more than 1 gigawatt solar. That was last year, and they started from a very low base. So that's what. And like I say, if Africa has done 4 gigawatt last year and Nigeria alone 1 gigawatt, I know it's the biggest country in terms of the population, but you could definitely see, and you can imagine the number of people that would have been impacted by that. But the funny thing is, as we're talking about that, I always like to remind people that no matter how much we talk about solar in Africa, for me, we haven't started yet. You'll be surprised to hear me say that, but if you bring that in the grand scheme of things, the whole solar production in Africa, it's barely 2% of the global capacity. With the country that hold more than 60% of the resource. So that's what I'm saying. We haven't even started. What we say is minuscule. We can't, when you have places like Germany to do is that 15 gigawatts? So that's to give you an idea. Yeah.
The smart thing would be to start manufacturing those panels straight in Africa, right? So
you have a lot of countries, more and more people now are asking for that, because which is the general conversation in terms of raw material, right? Because as we talked about energy transition,
I wasn't joking, by the way.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm just pushing in your direction to say that a lot of government in Africa are actually requesting that. But it's actually a broader conversation in terms of raw materials, especially critical materials, because the world can achieve what you call a just transition without key materials that most of them are found in Africa as well. Like, for example, lithium, cobalt, and all of that. And many governments now, they are tired of just being seen as, let's say, a market and a dumping ground. They want people now, okay, no problem. You can trade, you can get access to our resource, but we want you as well to build the infrastructure in here so that you can contribute to training people locally. So there's definitely a big push of getting a lot more manufacturing for the solar supply chain. And another thing that boosted that was also COVID, because with COVID, in fact, the rest of the world saw that with the full production being concentrated in China. So look what happened, obviously, when China is gripped. Is that gripping the rest of the world? That's why, for example, that there is this manifesto for manufacturing to come back to Europe and other places as well. So yeah, and that's also a sound that we also hearing in Africa. Yeah. So obviously it's going to take time, but yeah, people are pushing towards it. Yes. A lot of people in Africa now think in terms of region as opposed to just countries. Because if you go, for example, to Africa, I'm sure you heard about West Africa, East Africa, or Central Africa, Southern Africa. They realize that in the logic of this world, you want to be talking in terms of, obviously, regions, block. Because if it's just one single country, globalization, you're dead. There's nothing that you can do. And also in Africa, I don't know if you heard about the AFCFTA, which is the single markets, sort of to replicate a little bit what the EU has done, but obviously it's still a very early stage in Africa that it's been a design. And you could see as well a lot of countries now in Africa now putting the borders to other countries. So obviously banishing the visa rules. And part of it is actually being fueled by this spirit of Pan-Africanism, where people say, hey, I think it's time for us to, because I don't know if you know, but the intra-trade between African, it's abysmal. It's very, very low compared to Africa trade more with the rest of the world and with what it's doing in Africa. I think it's less than 18% of the trade actually between Africans, which is far lower than any other continent. So definitely there is this movement where people say, let's start working more together, come together, and maybe pull our resources together. And if we do that, we are stronger, compared to the rest of the world, speaking from one voice. So I believe, Oliver, to respond to your question, I think it's a movement and a spirit that is coming back, and it will get things to move, to shape.
That sounds like a beautiful message to end this one on. together and be stronger together.
Yeah,
that's
awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. Yeah, we really appreciate you sharing your insights.
Thank you very much for giving me the chance. So I know we we talked about many other things, but it was a beautiful conversation. I appreciate that.